Hello, Vincent Carroll speaking. Tutorial number 56, the immune system. The immune system from a Western medical point of view consists of the white blood cells. From an acupuncture medical point of view, we speak in terms of Wei Qi circulating outside of the body. And there's a direct relationship between the white blood cells, the Western medical concept of the immune system, and the Wei Qi. If the Wei Qi is powerful, pathogens will not be able to gain entry into the body. And of course, if our immune system is powerful, pathogens will be stopped before they can invade or significantly multiply within the body, producing clinical signs of an infection. So there's a strong similarity in the work done by both the Wei Qi and the white blood cells. The white blood cells are the Western medical's concept of the immune system. And when the white cells are abundant, infections generally can be stopped, unless the infection is so strong that it cannot be stopped. And therefore it's always a battle between the strength of the Wei Qi and the strength of the infection, or the strength of the white blood cells and the strength of the infection. One way or the other, you may have a weak viral infection, and although your Wei Qi or your white blood cells may not be abundant, they are still sufficient to prevent the infection gaining a foothold in your body. From a Wei Qi point of view, if the infection or the pathogenic factor, as we call it, comes your way, it will interact with the Wei Qi, and if the Wei Qi is strong, the Wei Qi will fight it off, and you will be unaware that there was interaction between a weak pathogen and your relatively strong Wei Qi. But if the pathogen is stronger, it will obstruct the Wei Qi, slowing the Wei Qi, stopping even the circulation of the Wei Qi, and you will feel chilly and cold, and you will shiver. And that in itself might get the Wei Qi going again. And you will say, gosh, I've come close to having an infection, but I seem to be better now. And that's a period of time when it could go either way, when the pathogenic infection factor could enter into the body, or whether the Wei Qi will be able to stop it. And many average type of infections are like that. Sometimes the pathogenic factor can be stopped on the throat, and a person might get a red throat, and that is viewed as the most interior part of the exterior, but still it is the exterior. The pathogen has not entered into your body fully at that point. And the same applies from a Western medical point of view. If your white cells are robust, then in that case you're not going to get infection. The white cells will be able to fight off the infection in exactly the same way that the Wei Qi can fight off the infection. So there's a great similarity in understanding between the concept of Wei Qi and the concept of the Western medical immune system. There's a difference in language and probably not a lot else in our understanding of what is going on. But also what is very important is that if a person has been subjected to repeated episodes of pathogenic invader, and if the Wei Qi, or for that matter the white cells, have been active fighting off these invaders or these pathogens, they get depleted. So eventually a fairly low-grade pathogen might gain entry to the body and create an infection or an pathogenic invader, a wind-heat invader, of greater strength than you would think so, simply because the white blood cells or the Wei Qi are sufficiently diminished. And this again just shows the dynamics here between the strength of the Wei Qi and the strength of the pathogen. In an ideal world, the pathogen should be relatively weak and the Wei Qi should always be fairly strong, or the white cells should be in abundance and your exposure to pathogens should be fairly occasional. Now, pathogens of low grade come our way all the time, simply because wherever we move, there are viral infections, usually in the form of droplet infections coming our way, but we're blissfully unaware of them because they tend to be relatively weak. But occasionally a pathogen will come that is particularly strong. The meningitis bacterial virus or bacteria might be an example of that. Neisseria meningiticus might be something which can be exceptionally strong. Again, the vast majority of people fight it off. Legionnaire's disease is another type of pathogen that could be particularly strong, although the majority of people with robust Wei Qis or robust white blood cells are able to fight them off, showing that with very few exceptions, very few exceptions, if your Wei Qi is sufficiently robust or your white cells are sufficiently abundant, that you usually be able to fight off infection. But if it's been chipped away over time by a multitude of small infections, when the big infection comes your way or the big pathogenic invader hits you, you will not be in a position to stop it, and it will go from the exterior to the interior and create infection. So therefore the red throat could become acute bronchitis or pleurisy, would be a typical example of that. But it all depends on the balance between the strength of the Wei Qi and the strength of the pathogen. So therefore, what do you do from an acupuncture point of view if somebody has repeated infections that are fairly mild but absolutely repetitive, and the sort of infection that shouldn't really occur and perhaps can become disproportionate? The throat infections that go down to the chest all the time would be an example of that. The person will probably use the phrase to you that they feel ran down, and indeed they are. So the treatment there is obviously to tonify the Wei Qi, provided there's no infection present. And that's a tricky thing. I mean, I leave at least a week of a gap between the last signs and symptoms of a pathogenic invader before I would think of tonifying, lest I tonify the pathogen in error. So when you're satisfied that the person doesn't have a pathogen and didn't have a pathogen for some time, you would tonify the root of post heaven Qi completely, because obviously Wei Qi depends upon the root of Qi. So tonify up the root of Qi, meaning spleen 6, stomach 36, Ren 12. I would also, of course, do spleen 3 as a source point. I would do lung 9 as well. That's very important because that strengthens up the gathering Qi. I would open the chest at Ren 17 to create greater gathering Qi, because of course gathering Qi can be a subtraction to overall Qi as well, in the sense that if your gathering Qi is down because your breathing is poor, you're not transferring value out of the food Qi into gathering Qi. So therefore needle lung, needle Ren 17 as well, to open up the chest to create greater value and therefore greater amounts of root of post heaven Qi in order to sort of manufacture Wei Qi. So tonify at all levels. If there's any damp or any other impediments or the liver's invading the spleen, prevent that happening, because a damaged spleen will not produce enough root of post heaven Qi, meaning spleen Qi, in order to create a robust immune system or a robust Wei Qi system. And of course steer clear as best as you can from any sort of infections or viruses coming your way, especially in the winter months. I mean, we all know that. But having said that, be aware that one or two sufficiently strong pathogens can wipe out Wei Qi, and although your Wei Qi may prevent that pathogen gaining entry into the body, it's depleted and wide open to the next pathogen that comes your way. So I'm inclined to wait a week, then I'm inclined to tonify in the absence of any evidence of any ongoing pathogenic invader, because of course if you tonify with a pathogen, you certainly run the risk of tonifying up the pathogen as well, and you don't want that to happen. So again, to summarize, this is a balancing act between the strength of the Wei Qi and the strength of the pathogen. And in the vast majority of cases, pathogens interact with the Wei Qi all of the time, and you're unaware of that interaction because your Wei Qi is strong and your pathogen is weak. But every now and again, you get a strong pathogen or your Wei Qi might be in a weak place. Be aware of that, and if you feel your pathogen is, or your Wei Qi is in a weak place, having previously been used on other pathogens coming your way, tonify it so you are then prepared for the next pathogen that might come your way. Thank you.